Welcome to the Danger Zone, the Terrible Infant Movies and TV podcast. I'm Will. We have Mike here with us today.
Hey, how you doing?
Hello, Mike. And then we have Jim.
Hello.
Yet again. And today's topic is something that we kind of talk about, I think, from time to time just on our own. And I'm sure everyone who's a big fan of movies talks about this. But it's the movies that are very good, we feel are very good, and generally have bad reviews or not particularly enthusiastic reviews, and those reviews affected their box office, or kind of older movies that don't have like much of a reputation for reasons that we feel are kind of undeserved. So we have a list that we're just going to go through and kind of talk about what the reviews were when the movie came out, what the box office was. I have written down some like quotes from sample reviews that we're going to talk about and just kind of like get into the overall sort of landscape of film criticism and where film critics are coming from and maybe why they're coming from that perspective and how in a lot of ways it sometimes feels like they're kind of missing the point of what certain movies are about. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a movie I think we all really like, or at least Jim and I do. I think Mike likes this movie, which is Brooklyn's Finest.
Hell yeah.
Came out in 2009, right?
9 or 8?
8 or 9. Directed by Antoine Fuqua.
Let's have a look.
Starring Don Cheadle, Ethan Hawke, Richard Gere, Wesley Snipes. It's a really big cast.
Yeah, you're right. It was 2009.
And so the overall box office for this movie was $36 million. 27 million in the US. So it made like whatever 9 million overseas. Rotten Tomatoes is 44%.
Really?
And
is that low?
So low. And the average rating, so I didn't realize this, but Rotten Tomatoes also has like a fine print area where it tells you the average rating, but it doesn't tell you where that comes from. And a lot of reviewers, like for instance, I know the New York Times, they don't give movies ratings. So where are they getting the rating from?
Right.
Or are they only measuring reviews that submit a specific rating? I don't know. It didn't say that I could see.
Well, so 44 in the Rotten Tomatoes world, that's the green splat, right? Like that's rotten.
Yeah.
Right.
And Metacritic, 43%, which is... and Metacritic works differently from Rotten Tomatoes if you're unfamiliar. Rotten Tomatoes is basically like every single critic is assigned basically a pass-fail grade for each movie. And it's based on the overall tone of the review. If they're not giving it a letter grade, if they're giving it like an F, obviously it's negative, and B, it's positive. But for those who don't give grades or have metrics, I'm assuming Rotten Tomatoes just reads the review and decides whether they think it's positive or negative. Metacritic takes actual percentages from reviews and averages those. So they don't use reviews that don't give a grade.
Yeah, it's surprising how close those two numbers
are.
are.
Yeah, none of the other ones are that close, I don't think.
It's astounding to me.
And I was amazed that was because I just watched this movie because I didn't actually, funnily enough, I didn't see it when it came out because it got bad reviews, and I was amazed by how good it was.
I don't know what it is about this specific movie. Like I like those like rated R, cop dramas that are like, they feel gritty and realistic. Like, I don't know anything about the cop world, especially not in New York. I've never even been to New York, but like it just you feel like this movie has like is grounded in reality with like how much the characters like struggle with each other and their families, and like not only the good cop versus a bad guy in the street, but it's just like there's villains everywhere. Like there's cops against cops and the whole 9 yards in that movie.
And that I really like so one of the main negative reviews that this movie got was the movie is generic. Like we've seen these characters, we've seen these situations.
See, I don't think it is at all because it's got like 3 distinct storylines with the 3 main characters: it's Richard Gere, Ethan Hawke, and Don Cheadle. So there's other characters, obviously, in other actors, but we follow those 3 and that like how they're interwoven with each other. Like characters are having effects on different characters in the other storylines that they don't even know about, and the way that they tie all this together in the end, I think is fucking awesome.
Yeah,
I think Antoine Fuqua does an amazing
disagree
job
with,
doing
and
it.
I would say that having lived in New York City, and I'm originally from New Jersey, I know that area really well, and that movie felt way more authentic to me than a lot of New York City movies that I see. Like even down to like
Phone Booth.
Like well, even like the geography of the movie is correct. Like, there's so many New York City movies where you're like in one place and then the next scene you're in another place and they're nowhere near each other. And
like palm trees in New York.
The geography of that movie is just even on like Gossip Girl, right? Like I know this is a stupid example, but like there are scenes in Gossip Girl where they go into a building in Manhattan and then they get up to the floor that they're going to and you see out the window and you're looking at Manhattan. So they're either in like Queens or New Jersey or something. You're like, it's just so bad that it's like painful. And with this movie, they obviously went to lengths to make it feel like
they obviously
what
shot
New York City feels like, and and the geography it just makes sense. And so something else that I thought of while you were talking about the way that the characters are set up and everything is this, which is something that you also see, I think, in American Gangster thematically is, with like they're talking about there's that scene where they're playing poker. Mm-hmm. They're talking about the money.
Yeah.
And it's like, why shouldn't we? And I've never seen a scene in a cop movie like that before.
Right, where they're talking about the corruption of like city officials
and where the money goes.
Right, and then so
it's like if we're underpaid.
In that movie, they're talking about some other fellow peer cop, whatever, that just got busted probably by internal affairs for skimming money or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple guys on that poker scene that are defending him, like he's looking out for himself. Why the fuck wouldn't we?
But just the way that they talk about where, like, if the money goes into a locker and then it's appropriated by the city and then it goes into spillover funds and then eventually ends up in the pocket of some politician
So this is going back to the review that's saying like these characters are generic. We've seen it before. Like, I don't think we have it all. I mean,
I totally.
If you look at like the Don Cheadle storyline, like he's this like deep undercover cop who's like starting to lose his shit because he doesn't even know if he's making the right decisions morally or not anymore. But he wants out more than anything, And I think like. There's sort of maybe some of that in like Leo's character in The Departed, I guess, but that
I would also
I wouldn't even put those two together. Like, the Don Cheadle character in Brooklyn's Finest is a reiteration of Leonardo DiCaprio in The Departed.
So another thing that strikes me with that, and I didn't see this in any of the reviews that I looked at, the Don Cheadle character, obviously, Don Cheadle is black, Antoine Fuqua is black, and there's obviously some element of like black filmmakers exploring certain aspects of what it's like to be black in like inner city America.
Yeah.
And none of the reviews mention this at all. And it just seems so like tone deaf to me. Yeah, to not realize that there's obviously that exploration going on. And to just like dismiss this movie as like, oh, it's a generic cop movie. So let me read you this one review because this made me furious. Okay. This is from Peter Rayner of the Christian Science Monitor.
Totally.
Yeah. Brooklyn's Finest does indeed provide a new genre twist. This must be the only cop movie ever made where a character is driven off the deep end by mold. Because remember Ethan Hawke? But I'm like, that, to me, that felt so real. Because it's like these people don't have money. He's got 4 kids. He's got a pregnant wife.
No shit. They're living
He makes a shitty detective salary, and they're living in an old house with mold in the wall. That, spoiler alert, but the mold in the wall is affecting Ethan Hawke's wife's lungs.
His pregnant wife's
and
lungs.
she has asthma or something, right? And it's like in her lungs, and it becomes like almost a breaking point for him because he feels like he's unable to provide for his family. And it's like...
Which is totally a relatable and universal aspect of like American life.
This review infuriated me. So here's another little snippet from a review, and this to me indicates more just the stupidity of film critics than it does any actual meaningful opinion on this movie, because it doesn't even, if you actually think about it, it doesn't make sense. Any movie that ends with a freeze frame of Richard Gere walking stoically away from a crime scene, teeming with police lights, can't be good.
Just just an umbrella policy. Like,
why does that have to do with the movie? Like literally nothing. That has nothing to do with anything in this movie.
Dang, that sucks.
And I just like the acting in this movie is so good, and
I think
feel
it's Ethan
like
Hawke's best performance.
I would
of his
agree
career.
with you, yeah, and I would say that like even if you are of the opinion that the characters are generic, which I'm not saying I agree with, but the actors bring so much depth to them that they feel like real people. And like as I was watching this movie, I was kind of comparing it to that movie with Edward Norton and Colin Farrell. You know what I'm talking about? Is it called Pride and Glory or
Pride
something?
and Glory, that's exactly what it's called. I was thinking Pride and Prejudice and couldn't get that out of my head.
I was like, that to me is a movie you could point to and be like, yeah, this is kind of a generic cop movie.
I completely agree. It's like that movie, if you look, it's got like Noah Emmerich in it also.
Yeah.
And
is it John Voight or something?
Yeah, I think it is John Voight. Anyway, so it's like you got these cops and like one of them's dirty
and
the other
brothers, right, or something.
They're like it's brother, like Colin Farrell married Edward Norton's sister, or something, and then Noah Emmerich is Edward Norton's brother, and then their dad, whatever. It doesn't matter what all the relationships are, but I think you're exactly right. I think Pride and Glory is a generic cop movie because it's just like about a cop that got in too deep over his head and he's trying to fight his way out, and then the good guy comes in to like set the ship, like to right the ship, and like we have to be better than this. We're cops, we're supposed to be the good guys, and And it's just kind of like an anticlimactic thing, you know, and there's like all these subplots that don't really have anything to do with the bigger picture of...
And that movie also, I remember I saw that movie when I lived in New York City, and some of it takes place in Harlem, and I lived in Harlem, and I'm like, the way that it was shot, it made no sense. Like, they're in Brooklyn in one scene, they're in Harlem 3 minutes later, and like, it just didn't feel like the city. And that's one of the things I loved about Brooklyn's Finest.
It reminds me of another film kind of like that. I think Joaquin Phoenix is in it. I want to say...
We Own the Night.
Yeah, which is the exact same thing where, like, one's a cop and it's the brother.
Is Mark Wahlberg in that, too?
Yeah, he is.
James Gray, right? Yeah.
It's all the same guys. And actually, when you brought up The Departed, I was going to mention that, too. Because The Departed is so praised, even though it's a remake in the exact same sort of movie that's been made before, but no one called it generic.
And I would say that
it came out around the same time.
But what's interesting to me is
and he won an Oscar, and that's probably one of his weaker movies.
So
I wouldn't know about that.
So here's my thing about The Departed. I really like The Departed as like an entertaining film, but to preface this again, I lived in Massachusetts for a long time, and I lived in
Will's lived a shitload of places.
I've lived all over the place, yeah. But I went to college in Massachusetts, and I lived there for several years after college, and I'm very, very familiar with Massachusetts. And The Departed really feels to me like a movie made by someone who's not from Massachusetts, who showed up and made a movie with like some locals, like Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon and stuff. Whereas Brooklyn's Finest feels
with
like
some locals, Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon.
They're from Boston.
The two biggest movie stars.
But I'm saying
planet.
like you drop them in there to get the authenticity of the city.
Jack Nicholson.
But it was filmed in Toronto, and like whereas like Spotlight, The Fighter, like these movies go to great lengths to feel like they're in Massachusetts. And to me, Brooklyn's Finest, like they really put in the effort to feel like New York City. And I think that they did a great job. So I have a couple other things here. One person said, to quote Yogi Berra, it's deja vu all over again. Now, this same reviewer, whose name is Nathan Rabin from the Onion AV Club.
Rabid?
Rabin? R-A-B-I-N.
Okay.
He said, but remember, you know that movie Out of the Furnace with Christian Bale?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that's a bad movie.
No,
but his review of that is, Out of the Furnace is a defiantly old-fashioned, well-crafted piece of storytelling whose power lies in its simplicity. So basically, he's praising one movie for being old-fashioned and simple, and he's saying another movie is a piece of shit because he's seen it before. Okay, but
sounds like my kind of guy.
I want to go off on this guy a little bit more because I dove into his review history. Okay, now there's a movie called The Pigeon Sat on a Branch, reflecting on existence, which is this like Swedish kind of like art film, and about that movie,
I couldn't tell by the title.
Yeah, right. About that movie, he said the tone is one of an unrelenting, absurd melancholy, and basically his criticism of the film was it's too monotonously in its tone, right? He gave Eyes Wide Shut a glowing review and said, Eyes Wide Shut is a masterpiece of sustained tone. So the one other thing I do want to bring up is we're going to move on from Brooklyn's Finest in a second, but and this isn't specifically unique to Brooklyn's Finest, but there's like such obvious subjectivity at play.
Yeah, see, it's like
when people review films that I think it's dangerous for the general public to look at these people and be like, these are experts who are objectively assessing films, because they're not.
And I think, like, just based on those last two things that you mentioned, it's like, are these reviewers writing reviews based on how they think an audience is going to receive it? You know, where it's not even their true opinion. Like, it's not even what they really think. Because if they're tearing apart one movie for one thing, but for that exact same aspect of another film, praising it, like what
are they even?
Yeah, like what are they? So where is their basis in reality?
They have no like benchmark. They just basically forget every other movie they've ever seen, and in that context, they're looking at one movie on its own, and so they could say things like that completely don't go together. Like, this movie's great for this reason, another movie's horrible for that same exact reason. And when they say like a movie like Brooklyn's Finest is like monotonous and they've seen it before, I'm like, there's been like hundreds and hundreds of cop drama movies and TV shows. And if you don't like Brooklyn's Finest for that one reason, do you hate the other?
Do you like that genre at all? Right.
Yeah,
and
it's obviously a specific genre made, specific. Like, do you hate every other movie in that genre?
And I would argue that, like, do
you hate Training Day? Do you
just hate fucking movies
altogether?
That's like 20% of all the movies ever are like that.
Well, one of the negative reviews of Brooklyn's Finest that I was just like hitting my head against my desk when I was reading it was, they build up this really great network of dramas, and then it ends in a shootout. It's like, it's a fucking police movie. That'd be like going to see a cowboy movie and being like, oh, at the end they shot each other. It's like, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Like, that's the whole point of the movie.
Like, on some cows.
They worked it out, and now
They
everyone's
sat down
happy.
and had a beer. And
Yeah.
but to me, that the ending of that movie really speaks to the philosophy of the movie, and it's not. I think it's very grim, and I think that it's bold of a movie that obviously cost some money and was a big release and has big name actors in it to be that grim and to like stick to.
Hell yeah.
So let me just read this one more thing and then we'll move on. I'm sorry. So this is a guy who trashed Brooklyn's Finest. Wrote this about Star Trek Into Darkness.
If only you guys could have seen the look on Will's face.
The truth the movie invites us to take to heart is that a society that thinks a child is better off in an institution than in a loving parental environment is a society desperately in need of treatment. This
What?
is about Star Trek Into Darkness. Okay, now
I couldn't even follow that sentence.
we know this screenwriter of, well, at least you guys have met him too, right? Of Star Trek Into Darkness. Yeah, and he fucking told me to my face that movie is a 9/11 conspiracy theory movie in which Khan is Osama
Right.
bin Laden and Peter Weller is the U.S. government.
Yeah.
What? Like what? Okay.
Wait, can we hear that sentence one more time?
The truth the movie invites us to take to heart is that I can't read it. Is that a society that thinks a child is better off in an institution than in a loving parental environment is a society desperately in need of treatment. Are they talking about Khan? Like, I don't even know who they're talking about. Are they talking about Kirk?
Alice Eve, maybe? I don't know.
Like,
Would they sleep through the whole movie and just like dream about something and write about it?
anyway, so moving on from Brooklyn's Finest. This was a movie that Jim suggested that I just watched for the first time a couple days ago. Rush.
One of in my opinion, I think it's one of the most underrated movies of this millennium.
And directed by Ron Howard, right? And when did
Yes.
it come out?
It's 2013.
That's pretty recent, right? And
Yeah,
it has,
relatively.
is it
Chris Hemsworth
and,
and,
Daniel Bruhl,
Daniel Bruhl,
who's in Inglourious Bastards.
Olivia Wilde.
Natalie Dormer's in like one scene. I saw her and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, she's going to be
she's in the opening. It's
a big
like-
character, and then she's in like one scene.
Right.
And there's a couple of
and it's Chris Hemsworth versus Daniel Bruhl.
in a racing,
Yeah,
Formula One racing.
Formula One takes place instead. It's based on a true story of Niki Lauda and James Hunt and their, sports rivalry against each other and sort of the dichotomy of these two guys who couldn't be more polar opposites of each other, just personality-wise, racing-wise, like just their entire beings were different. Their differences fed into each other, and it just fueled the rivalry even more.
So,
And it's fucking awesome.
yeah, and so I'll talk more about my opinions on the movie in a minute, but I did really enjoy it. So it made $27 million in the U.S.,
Which is horrible.
on a budget of $38 million.
That's bad.
And then, but it made $90 million worldwide because it did okay in Europe. It has relatively high score. So Rotten Tomatoes is 89% and Metacritic is 85%. But what struck me as really interesting is that most of the reviews are like backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
Where it's like, even if they like it in an asshole way.
Right.
So like, to give you an example of this, Rush is not a particularly deep film. But more importantly, it is not a film that mistakes itself for deep. It's like, what does that even fucking mean? Like, A, who gives a shit? And B, like,
I mean,
that's just such a stupid...
I would debate the shit out of that. It's not a particularly deep film all day long. Like, if you look at the arc of what those two characters go through individually and, like, their relationship to each other throughout this, like, what amounted to be their entire professional career, like, of course it's fucking deep. It's like these two guys were, like, literally pushing themselves to the brink of death just to beat the other one, but they weren't enemies. And they weren't, like, it wasn't fucking Peter Weller versus Benedict Cumberbatch. Like one was gonna like crush the other one with his bare hands. It wasn't any stupid thing like that. Like it was this very professional rivalry that existed in the real world that affected not just their individual lives, but everyone that they ever were in contact with, their racing teams, their families, everything.
Well, and so what I found to be interesting about that review, and what I would disagree with most specifically about that review is that, and by the way, that was a supposedly positive review. What was profound about that movie to me was the examination of how Chris Hemsworth is this character who he just has a natural ability to be good as a driver.
Yeah.
And the Daniel Bruhl character
Has
is
to work for it.
really analytic and intellectual, and it's like he wants it, and he has to go about it in this very pragmatic way of like he has to get money, and then he has to make the car, and like
He looks at everything like an equation.
and it is this really interesting study of like someone who has a deep desire to do something and achieves it because they have the intelligence and the means to do it versus someone who just has this innate like it was like he was born to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like maybe like he doesn't even appreciate that because he can just do it.
Right.
And like the other one has this jealousy of him for it, but is able to ultimately. Niki Lauda had a much longer, more successful career because he was able to apply like his intellectual brain to achieving these things.
And everything you're talking about is portrayed in the film, but not in a.
They don't say it.
No, it's not in an
and I think that
on-the-nose way.
so many film critics, and this is a kind of a point, they can't watch a film and be like, a lot of movies are not about what the characters are talking about. They're looking at something else. And I feel like a lot of film critics, that just goes over their head. They look at a movie like almost like a text. It's like they're reading a book.
Which is stupid because if their entire profession revolves around like analyzing and digging
and it's one of
deeper
those
into
things where
films.
it's like this is a discussion I think for another podcast because it's a huge discussion. But like if you look at music critics, like if you don't know how to play guitar, should you be telling a professional musician that their music is good or not? Like if you don't know how a movie is made, can you actually understand what a filmmaker is trying to say and what they have done?
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's $1 million question.
So,
it's always like it's one thing when they say this movie sucks or this is a bad movie, and it's like, and you can't, they're not a filmmaker, they don't know anything about it. Versus, I didn't like this movie. All right, you didn't like this movie, give your opinion why you didn't like it, but it doesn't mean it's a bad movie.
Yeah, and that's
I would get that a lot more. I'd be like, all right, this guy didn't like this movie for this specific reason. You can see what movie that person likes and what movies that person doesn't like, and you're like, all right, this isn't one of their movies, But to say a movie is bad, like the acting's bad, are you an actor? How do you know the acting's bad? Are the directing's bad? How do you know? Are you a director? Do you know anything
I think
about
a lot of people
really
really don't understand what directing is either.
Well, to be fair, like
there's some
you don't
examples
have
of
to be
you
a
don't.
professional actor to recognize a
like
his poor
terrible
performance.
acting, no, but
Right.
like
or a good performance.
But the nuances of like, so for instance, have you guys seen The Rover?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a friend who is not an actor, and
Are you gonna call him out by name here?
it's just like a casual like film viewer, and like will adamantly defend to death that Robert Pattinson was terrible, and I thought he was really good in that movie, and
it
he
was
was
the
like
best performance of his
exactly,
short
and
career.
he's like very committed to the role,
Yeah.
and like. And it's just one of those things of like, he's overacting or he's this or he's that. It's like you have to understand who the character is, why they're portraying them in a certain way. Like there's so much depth to why a person makes the decisions they make when they make something that it's like Mike is saying, like if you don't have the tools to objectively assess something, if you don't have the knowledge and you don't have the background, you should really just say, I don't like this. Not this is bad.
Not make a definitive determination on
So
the merit of it.
let's see if we can find some other stuff. Oh yeah, so this is another guy whose background I looked into a little bit. But so this pisses me off because this is actually not true. So this review is from Drew Hunt, who did work for the Chicago Reader and Slate, and is now, I was telling you guys about this guy earlier when we were talking about this. He's now a content manager for Honest. You know that brand that does like Honest diapers or like, I mean, I have a kid, so I know these things, but like,
Do they do like pistachios and shit, or is that?
yeah, it's like a hippie kind of company that like sells stuff at Whole Foods and whatever.
Right.
So this guy is no longer a film critic and looks pretty young based on the photos I was able to find of him on the internet. So like maybe 30, probably younger. So he was a film critic like right out of college, right?
Kind of like someone else that we know.
Yeah. This is entertaining enough, but ultimately it's spuriously triumphant Oscar baiting fluff. The word I have a problem here with is spurious, because I read about this movie after I saw it, and Niki Lauda, who's still alive, James Hunt passed away. Yeah. Niki Lauda has said that, they took a couple liberties, but this is 100% accurate of our relationship. So who the fuck is this guy saying that the movie is false when the people who fucking lived it are saying that it's true?
And not only that, but Ron Howard, before they did any kind of release or like critical review or screenings or anything for Rush, they screened it in Europe in like an airplane hangar, I think, full of a room full of like former and present Formula One drivers, like the industry professionals, like the real race car drivers. And he got a fucking standing ovation from them. So it's like what we're talking about. Like if you don't know the world or whatever the movie, like who the fuck he is, it's like this guy who's like, doing branded content for diapers now. Is like.
Can I also tell you that this guy said so? This is not, I know this is not like a Mike and Jim type of movie, but one of my absolute favorite movies of like this decade so far has been Blue is the Warmest Color, which is the French movie, right? Mm-hmm. And that movie and that's another movie that I think critics often misread, because that movie is very obviously about like class and race and immigration and like gender and sexuality and the intersections of all these things in like modern Europe.
Right.
But it uses this coming-of-age romance as the filter through which to examine these things, right? So that same guy who said this about Rush said this about Blue is the Warmest Color. The lead actresses deliver worthy screen performances. Like, worthy of what, motherfucker? Like, they won it for the first time ever in history. Those actresses won the grand prize at Cannes along with the director for making that movie. But
I mean, worthy of his branded content
Right,
Facebook
exactly.
profile for
So
Honest Diapers.
Worthy of his.
but then he goes, but this is the
appeal.
part that really pisses me off. The director mishandles his ultra widescreen form by shooting almost every scene in the same shallow focus medium close-up. It's like, okay, so show me the movies that you have made and what shot choices you made and how that, like, what?
Yeah, and I mean that's the director's choice as the filmmaker. Like what he chooses the aesthetic to be to tell his
And it's about,
to tell the story
like,
the way he was brought onto the project to tell it.
Again, it's just like, I mean, if that guy would have said not the director missteps instead of I didn't like these medium shots. All right,
but it's like,
fine. But you're saying he
but if
messed
you
up
like
by
the
doing
Hateful
it.
Eight, right? And this is something that people criticize Hateful Eight for, but it's shot in 70 millimeter and it's a lot of close up of faces. But I saw the cinematographer of that film speak and at a screening of it, and he was talking about how, you know, Tarantino's whole thing was this is about like the landscape of these people's minds. And so the landscape that we're showing is these epic shots of their faces. And it's influenced by Sergio Leone, who Mike loves, who does these huge, epic, widescreen shots of people's faces.
Right.
And it's like, how is that any less valid or like, you know, a use of your format than a shot of a fucking mountain? Like, what empathy can you have with a mountain? It's a fucking giant rock.
Yeah.
Like, you're...
Tell that to Kanye when he's shooting it for his fucking album cover.
We're like, we are ultimately all human beings, right? We want to see other human beings.
Yeah.
But the final thing I want to say about Rush, and you guys can have
I have another
thoughts if you want, but
I'm gonna tack on something at the end.
as I was watching that movie, so if you don't know, people listening, I read scripts for like studios, production companies, whatever, and so a lot of times my brain goes towards like screenplay. And there were like little tiny bits and pieces about the screenplay where I was like, well, I might do that differently, I might do this differently, whatever. But about like halfway through, during one of the races, I just got so caught up in how fucking fun that movie is.
It's a lot of fun.
And it's so loud and it's fast and it's like...
The music cues are great.
Yeah,
it's just...
I was like... It reminded me of when I was a kid and I loved like the Michael Keaton Batman and Terminator 2 just because they're big and loud and exciting.
Right.
And it's like if there was never a point at which you loved movies just for being excited by them, why the fuck are you a movie reviewer? Like, if you can't appreciate that about this movie, why are you watching these movies?
That's a good point. The thing I wanted to add on is like this one sort of loosely fits into the mold of like what we're talking about in this podcast because it does have like very solid like Rotten Tomatoes ratings and stuff. And I think like when it came out during the release, like there were some mentions of like, oh, it should be nominated for the Oscar for cinematography and shit like that. When it should have been, in my opinion. So the thing I wanted to add on to Rush is it loosely fits into the mold of what we're talking about in this podcast because it does have a really solid Rotten Tomatoes rating, kind of talking about why do these good movies get shitty reviews and things like that. Like Will said, this movie barely made, 27 million when it came out in the US?
Yeah, 27.
So it's like negative reviews inevitably drive down box office results,
Except horror films.
Except for stupid shit like Fast and Furious or Triple X or whatever. Yeah, except for stupid big movies like that. When this movie came out, it did have some positive vibes going. There was some talk about it being nominated for Oscars for certain technical categories like cinematography and stuff like that. When we first started to throw around the idea of this podcast, I remember I mentioned Rush specifically to Will in a text message, and his first response was, "Did anybody even see that fucking movie?" Because exactly like the shit that we're talking about. And it's like the negative reviews drive down people's interest in the movie inevitably, whether it's like a direct result, like they read a review, and then make a determination for themselves, like this sounds like a piece of shit, I don't want to watch it anymore. Or if it's just the buzz around the movie, or if like, it's the reviews are mediocre and so it has a really shitty or soft opening, or it barely breaks even in the States, even though it does really well overseas. It's just, that's why I wanted to include this movie in here, because it got like, it's got 89% of Rotten Tomatoes.
These positive reviews, like if I were to read these positive reviews, I still wouldn't want to see it. Because they're not like, this is really good. They're like, oh, this is fine.
And it's tough.
Exactly.
If it's a movie that's not like a big blockbuster movie that you're going to see, with movie prices the way they are, you're going to be like, all right, do I want to spend $20 on this like lukewarm reviewed movie? No, you're not going to go see it.
Exactly.
And that's going to drive the box office down. And when you see that, you'll be like, oh, it's probably not a good movie. I made the right decision. Whereas, the reviews could be completely pointless. And that's like one of the things you see studios like complain about is that, the reviews are driving their their box scores
like Rotten
down.
Tomatoes is like negatively affecting box office.
Because they do.
But then it's like, fucking, this is something I mentioned to Jim, but like Doctor Strange has the same Rotten Tomatoes percentage as Inglourious Bastards. So it's like, ultimately, it doesn't even mean anything. It's like, because if you dig into the reviews for those movies, the positive reviews for Inglourious Bastards are like, this is a fucking masterpiece.
Which
and
it
the
is.
Positive, I would totally agree, and I would argue that that's probably the best American movie of this fucking century so far. And I'm like an unabashed Tarantino fanboy, just so take that with a grain of salt. But
if you didn't pick that up already.
But then the people on the other side of the aisle, I mean, in the Doctor Strange reviews, are like, yeah, this is fine. This is an entertaining, stupid superhero movie. But they have the same percentage. Yeah, so so no one's actually looking. And, Rotten Tomatoes is owned by a studio. And if you look at, I think it's Warner Brothers. And
that sounds right.
If you look at The Dark Knight Returns, right? That's the last one, right?
Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight Rises. If you look at if you read the blurbs for that movie, and you read if you look at all the percentages and everything, it doesn't feel like if that had been some other studio's movie, that little red tomato where the reviewers are like, well, Christian Bale's good and blah 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 blah, but I didn't agree with it. Like that would be a splat somewhere else. And it's just like it's so suspicious. Okay, so that was Rush.
What else we got?
How about The Kingdom? Should we talk about The Kingdom?
Yeah, let's do The Kingdom.
I think we should.
So I saw The Kingdom actually because Jim, again, another one that Jim recommended, but someone had given me The Kingdom on DVD because they had it and they had never watched it. It was still unopened. And they're like, do you want this movie? And I was like,
it's a goddamn shame.
Okay. And then Jim was like, you should, because that's another one where when I saw that it was coming out, I was like, oh, because the cast is amazing.
Yeah.
And the subject matter is fascinating. And I was like, I want to see that. And then, so here we go. So The Kingdom, $70 million budget. Domestic was $46 million. Worldwide was $87 million.
So it lost a ton of money.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Rotten Tomatoes is 51%.
God, man. That's
And Metacritic is 56.
Pitiful.
And
what's Metacritic?
56. But let me read you a couple of these reviews, okay? And let me preface this by telling you that for the guy who wrote the first review that I'm going to read to you gave Suicide Squad 4 stars out of 5. A terrifically stupid film. Dumb, dumb, dumb.
Get the fuck
That's
out
it?
of here.
That's the review!
This guy go on like a 10-year acid trip before he saw Suicide Squad? He said dumb 3 times.
Did he mix
It's right there! Dumb, dumb, dumb.
Did he mix the reviews up? And he made that one for Suicide Squad?
10 years apart.
Look, I'm not saying The Kingdom is the greatest movie ever, but it's not dumb. It's well acted. It has good direction. It has
I think it's
scenes.
a legitimately a good movie.
Yeah,
not
it
just
is a
like,
good
I
movie.
like it. I think it's a good movie.
I don't understand how, I get, some movies bomb, but, with that cast and Peter Berg, a well-known director, I don't understand how it didn't make more money.
At the
Even
time,
then,
so think about it. It came out.
right?
This
What was it, 7?
Came out in 2007.
Yeah.
So, theoretically or realistically, it filmed between 05 and 06. You allow time for post-production and all that shit. I think they got a bunch of the good cast ahead of their time. Jamie Foxx wasn't he was still Jamie Foxx.
He did already Collateral, right?
But I thought that
was
at that
before.
point,
Right, but
Jamie
I'm
Foxx was in his because he had a lag kind of in his
that's
career, right?
after Booty Call and shit like that.
Yeah, and then he was in Django and he had a big comeback, right?
Right. So
Wasn't
I
Django,
think the King
That
was
later.
was a comeback.
So
for him,
if you
though,
look
right?
at Chris Cooper, who's in it, Jennifer Garner, Jason Bateman, Jamie Foxx.
that was Jason Bateman's first.
This is
big-
at this at the bottom of all those people's ascent of they're going to be in some very big time studio movies consistently for the rest of their career. Mm-hmm. And not only it was just cast really well. It was a very well casted film, but it's also a fucking action thriller to the max, especially the third act of that movie, the last 25 minutes or so.
So
it's a nonstop fucking intense shootout chase through. I don't know what city they're in. Some city in Saudi Arabia.
Riyadh, isn't it?
Riyadh is where most of
Yeah.
it's set. And then they go to a certain part. I forget the name, and it's supposed to be a heavily militant control.
Well, and this movie, I find that this movie is some of the negative reviews were here's another one. The Kingdom offers the war on terrorism we wanted to fight instead of the one we were stuck with. And it's well, as Mike pointed out to me, the film is not about the war on terrorism. It's about one specific incident.
Yeah.
And to me, it does a really good job of looking at this kind of new world of globalism that we live in and how we have all these problems with these cultural intricacies, and it's really difficult for people to land on the same page and And also, like, Peter Berg obviously is I would say, is a patriotic filmmaker, right? Like pro-American filmmaker.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so this is something else that annoys me, is that people are always, like, these film critics get mad because they say that, like, filmmakers have no opinion or perspective, but then Peter Berg comes along with an opinion and perspective, and they're like, I don't like your opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, well, at least he fucking has one.
Well, like I said, they're like, it's a movie about the war on terrorism. I'm like, maybe if you just watch that opening sequence where they do all the exposition, you could say it is. And I'm like, they did that so they don't have to spend 10 minutes explaining the beginning of the movie.
So just to tell you, the beginning of the movie is like a little like graphic card.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually.
It's cool.
And it's really
smart.
It's also suddenly very interesting again because of what's happening in Saudi Arabia right now. Yeah. And it's about how the, like 15 of the hijackers were Saudi.
15
is that right?
19, yeah.
And, there's actually a really interesting article in Vanity Fair, and I think it was like 2003 or so, about how when all the planes were grounded after 9/11, a bunch of Saudi people were allowed to fly out of the country, and Dick Cheney called and gave direct clearance himself. Yeah. And there's all these like shady circumstances about like the connections between Cheney and the Saudis and all this stuff. But this is all very pertinent again. Yeah, so it's really interesting to me to watch this movie. But it's like now.
That's a like interesting setup because, like I said, you don't have to waste time doing exposition. And I would say the movie is not like we said. The movie's not about the war on terror because it's one incident. The movie to me is almost like a cop movie. They have a case to solve and they're solving it. It just happens to be there. It's all about half the film is spent them finding clues.
It's like a procedural.
Interviewing suspects
This is an interesting point to me because a lot of the negative reviews condemn it as a police procedural, and I don't understand why to me that's a description. That's not a negative thing.
Like we said, that's like 20% of all movies ever.
What's negative? What's inherently negative about it being that type of movie?
As I was reading those reviews, so I'm a big Kurosawa fan, and Kurosawa was really well known for making genre films about political and social issues. So it was a way for him to make like what he saw as an entertaining movie while looking at. And do you would any of these fucking filmmakers go back and write like a retrospective on a Kurosawa police procedural and be like, this is just a police procedural? Of course they wouldn't. And so that's like this again brings the subjectivity exactly
it's like shit, it's a samurai movie. Of course it is. It's called The Seven Samurai. What do you expect it to be?
It's so irritating to see like how intense the subjectivity is, but when they're writing with this authoritative voice of like, this is the definitive opinion.
And my thing with that is like, they say it's a bad movie. Okay, we don't agree. But even if they said they don't like it, they never say why, right? They never give, there could be like, I don't like this movie because it's a police procedural, but why? What about it being a police procedural?
Right.
Is it poorly made? No. Is it interesting? Yeah, there's twists. What about it would you change to make it better if you don't like it?
Well, and they also, so another thing that I find to be interesting is that Peter Berg, and I've only seen like a handful of Peter Berg movies, but from what I get from his style and his approach is that he does a lot of cutting and he does a lot of close-ups and handheld and shit like that. And what he's doing to me is making very subjective movies where you're getting into the perspective of the different characters. And if you can watch his movies and understand that that's what he's doing, it's obvious that he's not trying to give this like God level thesis on what he thinks the war on terror is.
Yeah.
He's just making a movie about the experiences of these characters.
Yeah.
And that again seems like an inability on the part of the people who are reviewing these movies to understand what he's trying to do.
Yeah, like this movie, the main bad guy, he is a terrorist, but he's not like trying to bring war. Basically, he makes a car bomb and he has this big explosion in the beginning of the film, but he's not like...
It's a tad more complicated.
Yeah, a little bit, right? But it's not like he has like... It's not like he's like the king of like a country with like 100,000 troops, right?
It's not MBS for sure.
He lives in a fucking apartment at the end with like one kid, right? It's like one specific incident, and in it they almost solve the case when they're trying to leave in like sort of the middle of the film, right before the third act gets into it. They literally go and kill some low-level targets, and Jeremy Piven's character's like, good job, you guys did your mission, you can go home. Like, literally, that's enough for them. And it's just that the attack happens on the car chase, that third act happens, but it's like, that's the whole scope of the film. It doesn't need to be the war on terror.
Like Zero Dark 30 or something. Like, not every movie needs to be that movie.
Yeah,
So here's one other thing that I read that I won't say much about, but if you guys have any opinion on this, racist was another criticism of this movie.
Of the Kingdom?
Yeah.
Against who? Against
I'm assuming
against the good, the two prominent Arab people that are actually good in it.
I mean, one of the main characters
yeah.
that's like one of the main good guys is a Saudi.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Like he's their chaperone, for lack of a better word. Like the entire fucking movie.
He's one of the more noble characters.
And he wants to fight terrorism in his own country. Like he wants to catch the guy that set off Mike's,
Well, I mean, this
car bomb.
Car bomb.
This to me, like, it makes me think of American Sniper too, and like.
Well, see, okay, like I want to backtrack a little bit. I want to go back to what you said earlier because I think you put everything in like just a perfectly tied up bow of like what this movie's supposed to be about, exploring cultural differences in a time. Seeing that when it came out, 2007. That was right at the start of the surge when we sent a shitload more soldiers to Iraq and Afghanistan. Right, people had already stopped paying attention to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like. Afghanistan started 2001, Iraq started in 2003. So this is already several years in for both, obviously. Yeah. And people just kind of like checked out, the iPhone came out, blah, blah, blah. Like YouTube, Bush won a second term, all that kind of shit. Like there was no end in sight. So it's kind of just like, okay, we're at war. We're going to like, obviously daily life's going to go on. But when you're talking about like, Peter Berg used this crime solving procedural technique, like set in a foreign country that just happened to be the Middle East, and to explore like, what our presence is, not just in the scope of like this FBI investigation in the movie, but just like Westerners in the Middle East at any one time, and like how they're perceived and what the collective goal is between the two countries, and like how and why it's so complicated to reach that common goal, right? Mm-hmm. But then we got these fucking assholes saying, "Oh, it's a racist movie because of a terrorist that was Middle Eastern." Detonated the car bomb in the beginning. It was like no fucking shit.
I mean, that's like racist and anti-Arab is a big criticism that Homeland gets, and it's like so Homeland, if you don't know, is based on an Israeli show. Yeah, right. I've never seen the Israeli show, and maybe the Israeli show is anti-Arab. I don't honestly know.
I imagine it probably would be very anti-Arab.
But with Homeland, I honestly don't see it, and like I'm usually very sensitive to these things, and I'm like, there's a lot of maybe it's the fact that they focus on terrorism in the Middle East. And so it seems like... But
then they don't do that in the later seasons. No, I mean, we're getting off track here, but like they turn it to domestic terrorism 100% like in season 6 and 7.
I haven't seen 7, but 6, yeah.
So going back to the Kingdom...
And then they get back to Russians being bad. Yeah. Which is always fun for
always
me.
Fun, yeah.
Well, going back to the Kingdom, so like you're getting on the reviews like, oh, it's racist, it's tone deaf of our presence in the Middle East and this, that, and the other. When in reality, it's an action thriller movie, right? It's a really intense movie, especially like, in like Act 1 and Act 3 are just like nonstop action sequences. When Peter Berg at his finest, right? That's what he does great. Like we've been talking about, I don't understand why some of these reviewers, or a lot of them, can't remove themselves from like, a movie is not supposed to be, this grand thing of like this God level perspective of what Middle Eastern terrorism is or isn't, or what the global war on terror is or isn't. It's just a fucking action movie set in Riyadh.
Yeah.
Well, and so
it's not even based on a true story.
No.
Yeah.
But this to me this brings up an interesting point, because this is something that I think about a lot, and sometimes I talk to people about it and I think I'm over intellectualizing it, but it seems to me that the language of film criticism is inherently classist. And I think that they look at like, at least in their minds, right? And it's like the movies that we take seriously are the movies that have like a subtle aesthetic, or are from a Western European country like France or somewhere like that, right? Or like even if you look at the differences between how we perceive Japanese films and how we perceive Chinese films, and how we think of Japan as this refined, elegant place, and we think of China as this kind of chaotic, like people spitting on the ground, like Chinatown is dirty, whatever, right? And so like movies that are in a genre that is considered crass or like for the masses or whatever are not worthy of the same thought and treatment as whatever, like what's your like classic Oscar bait movie?
The Artist.
Critics all fall over themselves for. Like The Artist is the perfect example.
The last 3 films that Daniel Day-Lewis made.
Does Paul Thomas or like yeah, well, or like I mean, you can find the fucking perfect example of this in the fucking work of Paul Thomas Anderson, and like The Master versus Boogie Nights. Like I know Boogie Nights was well reviewed, but like The Master really is so one of those films where it's like this is a film for like self-satisfied pseudo intellectuals who think that it's fucking profound. And the
I don't think I
Kingdom
fit in
is-
that category.
No, I love Paul Thomas Anderson, and I think a lot of people would dismiss my film taste as being kind of pretentious and wanky because like I love Godard and stuff like this, but I was bored to tears by that fucking movie.
The Master was horrible.
But it got such glowing reviews, and like even now, like I mean, when did that movie come out? 4 years ago? 5 years ago?
The Master?
In 2012, I think.
Yeah, so 6 years ago, and people are writing retrospectives on it, like already. About how great it was and shit, and I'm like, did you not see that?
I never
movie
even
Blood?
finished it.
Like,
I've started that movie
the
twice.
characters
Like,
were so unlikable that you just can't watch it.
Well,
I mean, it's
and
about
even,
fucking
like-
L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, so nobody likes that fucking asshole except for all the psychos in Scientology.
one of the things to
David
me
Miscavige.
like that irked me about it was that I understood what P.T. Anderson was doing with the different scenes and how he's showing you the characters, but it wasn't like and like you know like obviously he's fantastic with like the cinematic design of it, like
Yeah,
the shots
yeah.
he's doing and stuff, but it's not like it doesn't compel me as like a piece of cinema to be like, this is really exciting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just kind of like I don't care. From
Like-
And this is a
We're
little
all on
off
the same
topic,
boat there.
but
Yeah.
I can't believe that Daniel Day-Lewis picked Phantom Thread to be his last film. Like,
So-
like
I
how do
didn't
you
see
make
Phantom
Gangs of
Thread.
New York and There Will Be Blood and then choose that piece of shit to be your last
So
film?
I have an interesting theory.
you've seen it?
I've seen parts, I just couldn't.
So,
It's
okay.
just so... Like,
I have an interesting theory to add on to that. It's totally uncorroborated. Like, it's just 0% credible. But it totally makes sense, right?
so it's probably 100%.
So it's this guy I work with at the studio that I work with. I don't want to like single him out too much, but he basically said that I forgot if this was just his theory or if he heard it from somebody, whatever the case was.
Is it James Cameron?
It is James Cameron.
It's John Landau. No, but he basically said that. So Daniel Day-Lewis is not, obviously at this point in his career, he's not the kind of actor that's just going to like film principal photography, do some looping or ADR, and then just check out completely.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be very active in like how the film comes together in editing and you know like what the final product's going to be.
yeah.
And Daniel Day-Lewis was so disgusted at like this project that he was into and like what it was going to turn out to be. Like it was so far removed from like his vision of doing like Paul Thomas Anderson's final cut versus what Daniel Day-Lewis thought this project was going to be. We're so far away from each other. He's like, you know what? I don't ever want to make a mistake this big again. So I'm going to fucking quit acting.
I'm done.
Now, again, that
knows
is a
if
totally
that's true?
uncorroborated theory, but I think that's 100% true.
I believe it.
Okay, so one more thing on the Kingdom
yeah.
real quick. And another, like, me, I'm a, unabashed Peter Berg diehard, right? He's had some huge misses in career, and he's made some really shitty movies.
Battleship?
Yeah, Hancock.
I never saw it.
So the Kingdom has a very interesting lineage that you can tie it into the modern war movie, like post 2013, basically post Lone Survivor. So when Lone Survivor was getting shopped around, it was still a book. And if you read into like if you watch all the behind the scenes documentaries, like content on Lone Survivor and stuff like that, there's a lot of interviews with Marco Cottrell and Peter Berg and everything like that. So Lone Survivor was a huge hit in print when the book came out. And so Marcus Cottrell and his agents and the publishing company were shopping it around Hollywood. It's like, who's going to be the best fit to translate this from a book to the screen? And he talks about he met with all these different, like, really high profile directors and producers, and all of them were just like, you know, they wanted to be like this big explode, like Michael Bay type flashy bullshit, like just like really plastic, like artificial interpretation of this, you know, horrific, or this mission that went horrifically wrong, and he lost all the guys that he like, you know, were his brothers. And then so he like basically was meeting after meeting of just him being turned off by Hollywood, and like Hollywood's, you know, goal for
It's like they're telling him how his story
exactly.
should be.
So then he met with Peter Berg, and instead of Peter Berg giving him like this grand pitch of like, oh, this is what I want to do, and like, you know, we want to film it here and do this, and like this is the actor I want, blah blah blah. He basically told Marcus Cottrell, go to my agency. They set up a screening of The Kingdom, which is my last like big action movie that has to do with this subject matter in the Middle East, blah blah blah. If you like it, we'll go to dinner and talk about Lone Survivor. If you don't, you know, no big deal. You can just go to your next meeting, whatever. Mark Stroh went and watched it, and he loved The Kingdom so much that he's like at that point, he's like, Peter Berg's going to write and direct Lone Survivor. Like, this is a guy to make my movie. And at that point, so Lone Survivor came out in 2013. And at that point, there wasn't really a whole lot of high-profile war movies on the current wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, there's like Jarhead was like, you know, throwback to
First Gulf War,
right?
Yeah,
exactly. And like that was 2005. So there was like a
when
really
did Hurt Locker come out?
Hurt Locker was 2007. So yeah, I mean that's still like.
But that was like the first one.
The first one that got any kind of like really big attention. So then The Lone Survivor came out, which is a movie that I am very connected to. You know, like the subject matter and what it like how it affected me and like my career through film school and this and the other, blah blah blah. But Lone Survivor was actually a very commercially successful movie, which spawned American Sniper, Thank You for Your Service, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk,
What about
shit like this. So like, there's this wave of like
the Hemsworth, the horse one.
War Horse.
Yeah, is that about?
No,
No,
World War One.
No, the one with Hemsworth, and they're like soldiers. In
12 Strong.
Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yeah, so think about Lone Survivor came out in 2013, so it's only 5 years ago, barely, right? And think about the wave of Iraq and Afghanistan war movies that have come out since then, right? So if you, like, Mark Zutrell chose Peter Berg to make Lone Survivor, which spawned this new era of war movies because of what he did in the Kingdom and what Mark Zutrell thought of the Kingdom.
Because of that stupid police procedural.
Yeah.
The racist
The
one.
racist police procedural.
So we just have a couple more here. Waterworld.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that movie. Kim Coates is the best.
So it made $264 million worldwide.
But apparently that's not enough money.
Well, no, but so I kept digging because I've read that movie was actually not. It didn't lose money, and that's kind of the myth of it. So it made within like the
That's
first.
That's not kind of the myth of it. That is the myth of it.
So within the first couple years after that movie came out, it made $190 million in like a combination of home media, merchandising, and TV rights.
And what we're talking, like $1992 or some shit?
96. That was
it
by,
came out in 95.
by 90.
Was it 95?
Yeah, by 96
yeah.
or 97, it had made like $190 million. So you put that on top of 264 I mean, its budget was 175. Then that's.
It made money.
Yeah.
It just didn't make $1 billion like they want. Right?
But it had 42% Rotten Tomatoes, 56% on Metacritic. So when I was rewatching this, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I was watching like bits and pieces of it. The only thing I didn't like about it was the music. It felt kind of dated and corny and like 90s style scoring.
Yeah.
But like, it is exactly what you fucking think it's going to be. It's like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie on water. Like that's exactly what it is.
I mean, and if you're tired of like these police procedurals, all right, here's a movie. How many movies are like that, right? It's very unique. Dennis Hopper's really good in it.
Keep going, Mike.
But so here, listen to this. This is a negative review of this movie. This is from the Associated Press. Costner is totally humorless and as dreary as the landscape he travels.
Yeah, because I thought we were watching a comedy.
Has anyone seen Fury Road? Like the most well-reviewed action movie ever. Yeah. Tom Hardy, totally humorless. Yeah. Like what?
With like 4 lines, and
Tom Hardy
half the movie. Yeah.
Tom Hardy who ADR'd every single one of his fucking syllables like 100 times.
Which I'm not trying to bash it because I love Fury Road.
It's an awesome movie.
Everybody loves that movie.
But it's like such a stupid criticism. It's like, what's he supposed to be cracking jokes because the fucking world is over and he has guilt?
Dude, that's what Kim Coates is for with the fucking line plan. The beginning, like paper. You ever see paper? You remember that?
Yeah. Oh man.
So like I think this is just an example of like when people say like it's just like one of the worst movies ever. It's obviously not. It's not, Godfather, but it's a well-made big budget action movie in the mid 90s. And it's like, what do you want?
Like that, yeah.
What Will said, it's exactly what it is supposed to be. Yeah. Like that movie knows its lane and it stays in it perfectly well. Like it doesn't try to be fucking funny because it's not a comedy, you know? It doesn't try to be like this raw, like Bourne Identity or Bourne Ultimatum, like raw action movie that always fist fights and shit. It's just this fucking a bunch of clunky, shitty handmade boats that are like riff-raff together from spare parts.
It's like an action adventure movie.
Yeah, and it's a fucking like a chase movie, right?
And it's something else that this just kind of reminds me of is this notion that and I think we've talked about this before, like off the podcast, but the idea that film critics, like, they see theatrical releases, which means that they're seeing the best movies that get made, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And even the worst of those movies is 1,000 times better than the movies they're not seeing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they understand, like the movie that comes immediately to my mind that Mike and I saw pretty recently was Cyborg, the Van Damme movie.
Whew.
Like, that's a fucking bad movie. Like, that is a bad, like, watch.
And I like Van Damme a lot, but
Like, watch
never seen
that
it.
and then watch Waterworld.
yeah.
Like, so just to give you some idea of how bad Cyborg is, when they originally shot the movie, there was no Cyborg in it. And then they watched it and they're like, we need a Cyborg. So they did reshoots of like some robot thing and put it in the movie. And the cutaways don't even match.
They don't match.
It's like different backgrounds and
The
shit.
first 20 minutes of the movie, like, there's all these random cuts and it doesn't make sense at all. And the Cyborg, they show, like, these scenes in the beginning, and then for the rest of the movie, it's just
There's
like
no
some
cyborg,
chick.
yeah.
And it's just some woman running around.
But in the beginning, you see there's like some attempt to do special effects where she looks like a robot. She's moving weirdly. And then the rest of the movie is just an actor.
So even that, it's
so
a really bad movie. And even that is still better than a lot of movies that people don't see, right?
Yeah. So
But,
it's
like, that's a bad movie.
But like, if to say that Waterworld is bad, it's like you must not have seen a genuinely bad movie.
Right.
Just a couple
Like
other
Skyline.
reviews.
That's the worst fucking movie I've ever seen in my life.
Or Battlefield. What's that movie with the
Battlefield
Battlefield
Earth.
Earth,
Yeah,
where
alright,
every camera angle is canted to the side,
Yeah.
and like so. Costner's pricey post-apocalyptic sloshbuckler isn't a seafaring classic.
Okay.
That's a negative review. It's like, what?
What are they expecting?
What are they
Captain
comparing
Ron?
it to?
I mean, it's like seeing like a mediocre mafia movie and being like, this isn't The Godfather. No shit.
What are they comparing
like,
it to? How many
what is a
seafaring...
what, like the fucking Errol
This is
Flynn
before,
movies?
like, Parts of the Caribbean and all that stuff. What other movies are they comparing
probably
it to?
Errol
What was that?
Flynn.
Carrie Ewell's?
Cary Elwes? Is that his name? What is his name? Oh,
Cary
Cutthroat
Elwes.
Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they're comparing it to.
I would
Isn't
pause
Gina
it.
Davis in that?
I would pause it all fucking day that Waterworld is 1,000 times better than what I don't even
Cutthroat
know.
Island.
Cutthroat
Yeah.
Island.
So this is
Yeah, Gina Davis is in that.
in this one, we can talk about movie finance if we want, but this is Jonathan Rosenbaum, who's a film reviewer. This movie feels like it was made by a bank rather than a person. Now, here's my question about this.
Does he understand how the film business works?
Right, but more to the point.
Movies are made by a bank.
More to the point, if a bank, and banks obviously are directly invested in basically every movie that gets made, right? But if a bank and bank managers were making the decisions, they wouldn't put $175 million of fucking risk on the line.
No.
Like, if a bank were a production
would've
company,
cut costs
every movie would
everywhere.
cost $2 million.
Yeah.
There's no way that they would, like, this is just such a stupid statement. It's like, what is he trying to say that it's cynical and calculated towards making a profit? It's like every fucking movie is calculated towards making a profit. Otherwise, no one will
Every
put money
single
into
one
it.
is. No matter who knows it more than the next person, like on that specific project, every fucking movie in the world wants to make money.
Yeah.
Every single one. It doesn't matter how much of an auteur the director, blue is warm as color. I guarantee you that movie, that script was promised, like, this is going to, like, somebody thought... This,
Well, it's based on a comic book, too. So
right.
it's like,
Somebody read the script and thought, people will pay money to watch this more than I'm going to spend to make the movie.
And then, like, if you compare Waterworld to, like, a big budget movie now, like, Waterworld, like, all that shit was built. Like, they built everything. And now they're just, just stand in front of a green
jet
screen.
skis going underwater, for Christ's sake.
Seriously, when I was rewatching that movie, I was, like, amazed by some of the shots.
There's some huge action sequence setups, like, just
And that's
these set pieces that were just, like,
you gotta build. And that's why Fury Road was so good, because, like, they did do a lot of, like, physical stuff and actual stuff and not a ton of VFX and green screen stuff. And, like, this is a movie we talked about not too long ago, Apocalypto. I was watching the behind-the-scenes footage. You know the scene where they're being taken into the village?
Yeah.
And you have all these pyramid stuff? They built that. And they built that because Mel Gibson's like, I want to build it and I don't want to do green screen. So they built it all.
Daddy Gibson.
And it's like, there's not a movie. Now, if a director that's not like Christopher Nolan or Tarantino was like, build that, they'd be like, no, we're going to just put a green screen back there. You're fired. We're going to put a green screen here.
Or unless it's
light
Netflix.
it. And
And have you heard about this Netflix thing with Kevin Costner and Tyler Sheridan? Where they're Taylor Sheridan, where they're doing like some big epic western or something. And so I don't know if this is true.
Westerns are good.
But so they supposedly there have been leaked photos from the set of like actual cows that have been like made to look like they were shot in battle, or horses or something, like just laying out in these fields in Wyoming and shit.
Really?
That's cool.
Are you sure it's not Yellowstone, like the Paramount Network show?
So from what I read, it was because the reason I read about it was because the ASPCA was sent photographs by people working on the set of these animals.
Do people on the set not know they're fucking fake?
No, they said that they're actually dying and they're like rotting in the sun.
Are they though?
I don't know because this is like
that'd be bad if they really.
Yeah, because the movie.
But I don't know anything we're talking about, but I'll say it right now that there's no way that's like in 2018.
This is what these the people on the set of this movie
come
are claiming that these like they could smell the rot from these animals, and they've actually been like cut up,
probably
and, like,
sniffing
left
their
in
own
the sun
asshole.
or whatever. But it is interesting to me that Netflix and this is something David Fincher said when I read an interview with him about House of Cards. He's like, the great thing about working with Netflix is they have no creative executives.
Yeah.
So no one's giving us notes, and they just assume we know what we're doing, and we can do whatever the fuck we want.
Which is nice. That's
And-
kind of the
I
way
mean,
it
that's
should be.
100% not true, but like they are way more artist friendly, and like they take the reins off way more than any other studio in town. There's that like top down philosophy of like artists first, like that's their mantra, so to say. But like there's definitely creative executives and
Obviously,
shit.
but
And what I want to go back and say is like whatever that dead animal shit. I'm just saying, like I've been on set a bunch with live animals, and there's no way at a project that scale in 2018, like there's no way that they're killing real animals.
I'm not saying they are.
That is outside the realm of possibility.
It made me think of Netflix's and like this kind of return to wanting to try to do.
Yeah, I remember the show. I think it was Lucky on HBO, and it was about horse racing.
Yeah, a couple horses died,
and like the show got canceled. And it was like a huge deal. There's no way they would just like leave cows in the sun to rot and like get away with it on a Kevin Costner movie. No fucking way.
Double tap a cow to the back of the head, just watch it die in the field.
Netflix would be sued.
Should we call Kevin Costner?
Yeah, let's give him a call. Let's get him on
like
the
those
line.
fucking BP assholes did when they blew up the Gulf of Mexico. Like, let's get James Cameron on the horn.
Well, didn't they? I was under the impression that for the Peter Berg film Deepwater Horizon, they just did the spill again. Is that true?
That's what I heard too.
Because they wanted it to be real.
Yeah, and they're like, no, just that movie still got rated green, because they recycled their water bottles.
Really? Nice. Yeah. So, Reign of Fire. Fuck yeah. Dragon movie. 2002. The Dragon movie. Directed by Rob Bowman. Christian Bale is in it. Matthew McConaughey is in it. Gerard Butler is in it early in his career. And then Isabel Scorupco?
Isabel S.
Who was in GoldenEye, the Pierce Brosnan James Bond film. So $60 million was the budget on this movie.
I believe
made
it.
43 domestic and 82 altogether.
So I lost money.
Yeah, big time.
You don't get to keep all of it.
Rotten. Actually, these reviews are these scores are pretty close. Rotten Tomatoes 40%, Metacritic 39.
Dang.
Yeesh.
That's bad.
Okay, so here's a review of Reign of Fire from Mark LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle. And before I read it, I want to read you some things that he said about Crash, the Paul Haggis movie.
Best picture winner.
Smart writing, taut situations, and without a doubt, a very skillful work.
Okay.
I would argue against all of those.
Let's hear what you got to say about Reign of Fire.
Truly awful.
Ah.
2-word review.
That's it. End of story.
Give me my money. Give me my money.
What? Like, there's no way that movie is truly awful.
So Reign of Fire, I had first seen, I can't even like pinpoint a date. I'm going to guess like somewhere around 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
I saw it in theaters.
Really?
Yeah.
But I rewatched it this morning in preparation for us talking about it right now. And that movie's not like, I don't understand why it would have bombed, Like it's got, I mean, at the time, granted, Matthew McConaughey was like, this was pre like failure to launch and all that bullshit rom-com shit that he did.
Yeah.
Because he went like, what was that Time to Kill?
Yeah.
Came out like, probably late 90s or something,
yeah,
or something like
96,
that.
97.
It is like,
like that, yeah.
Time to Kill, stuff like that. And then this, and then it's like, did he turn to like the stupid romantic comedy like Failure to Launch, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, and fill in the blank with all these other dumb bullshit ones? Because Reign of Fire tanks so bad, right? There's like this big scale apocalyptic movie, like all the special effects, dragons, they burn down the whole fucking island of Scotland or whatever, and then he's like, well, maybe I suck at like these dramatic thrillers. Maybe I should just go make movies with Sarah Jessica Parker.
Maybe he makes these movies that he thought would be good and they're bombs, and he's like looking at his career and he's like, I make one or two more of these and I'm not going to get any more movie roles. play it safe, make the stupid romantic comedy that's been done a million times before. Speaking of generic, like every romantic comedy is basically the same, right?
Yeah.
But people still watch them and
Except
don't
for
complain.
Shaun of the Dead. It's probably the best one.
The Zom rom-com.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyways, so Ring of Fire, like, I rewatched it this morning in preparation for this, and I was blown away with how perfectly structured the first act is. Like, to set up, this is the world that we're in now, and not only that, like, how the dragons came to be and whatever, and like how they took over the earth, but like the little community that Christian Bale is like supposed to be leading, and like trying to survive, and what their status is among these other like rogue communities that they're trying to keep in contact with just to survive against the dragons and this, fallout of the apocalypse. And then the introduction of Matthew McConaughey and his band of misfits, or whatever you want to call them, and like how that sets off like the entire second act of the movie, and like it just gets deeper and deeper into like we have to dig ourselves out of this hole. We have to do more than just survive.
All right.
I found myself into the movie. Like I wasn't just watching like, okay, let me take some fucking notes for the podcast. I'm like, hell yeah, like, this movie's awesome.
Yeah. So these are some other fun. Here's a negative review: silly, loud, and goofy.
Okay.
It's like, well,
Goofy.
yeah, I didn't think it was goofy at all.
No. People burning alive.
So
Yeah, I guess that's goofy.
Gerard Butler got fucking torched, man.
here's an interesting one. This is from Liam Lacey, who I will preface this by saying gave a glowing review to Age of Ultron, the Avengers movie.
Never even saw that.
And he says, Reign of Fire never comes close to recovering from its demented premise.
That dragons.
It's like, if you don't like movies about fucking dragons,
Or the apocalypse.
don't see a movie about fucking dragons. But how is a movie about dragons being buried under the earth? It's like a hard sci-fi movie. Like, that's what it is. Like,
Yeah.
they come alive. How is that sillier than a fucking scientist who becomes enraged and turns into a giant green monster and starts smashing the shit out of people? Like,
It travels to different galaxies just by jumping there.
how is that? Like, what?
He does a burpee and then he lands on Mars.
And what's even more weird about that review is, regardless of what you think about those films, that's universally known as the worst of the three, right?
What are you
Age
talking
of
about?
Ultron?
Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Those
I've
three
never
Avenger movies.
I've never seen
It's
it.
by far the worst of the three. And even if you hate those movies, how can he like the worst one of those three movies? Like,
This game guy, by the way, gave a glowing review also to Foxcatcher, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, except for the fact that it's hilarious.
But it's totally not supposed to be.
No, it's not!
So,
what I don't get though is like, I play a lot of video games, and I don't know if you guys do or not, but like, and I play a lot of RPGs, and in every RPG, whenever there's like a dragon, everyone just like goes crazy and gets super excited and super popular. I don't get why there's not more dragons in film, because I can't think of another.
Well, there's the Liam Neeson movie, right? Dragonheart?
yeah.
Yeah, from the 90s.
Lionheart
like,
or
there's not-
whatever. Or is
Well,
Dragon?
Lionheart's a Van Damme
Dragonheart.
movie.
I think it's Dragonheart. And
Well, it's
there's-
because Game of Thrones has the market
Game of Thrones
on
now did it, but like
How to Train Your
But how
Dragon.
many like dragon
No, there need to be
movies
more badass dragon movies.
Yeah,
I totally
dragons are
agree
cool.
with you.
People love them in video games, so I don't see why there's not more.
Despite
They're
it, here's another
really
one.
nice bad guys.
Despite a few epic revelations, we never get a sense of living, breathing dragons.
Are you
Don't
fucking
they
kidding me?
burn
Did
someone
somebody
alive?
write that
Yeah.
and publish it? We never get a sense of living, breathing dragons.
What does that mean? It's like
What?
You need David Attenborough's voice being like, and here the dragons lay their eggs. As you can see, the mother is protecting her young.
It was like, instead of when maybe if they had Jeremy Irons just like yawn whenever like a dragon would blow fire, the guy would be like, hell yeah, that's a real dragon.
So stupid.
Didn't he voice the dragon, whatever stupid movie you're talking about, the Dragonheart?
Oh, did he? I don't know.
I think so.
He did.
Yeah.
I think he did. It's a kid's or the Never Ending Story had a dragon in it, right?
Yeah, did it? I thought it had
think
like a furry dragon.
like a
looking
dog
thing.
with wings?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was supposed to be. Dog with-
Whatever.
Whatever. It was a
So
good
Reign of
movie.
Fire, like, so this movie is, this really bleak landscape, whatever. It's like the whole world is turned to ash, but there's still shit to burn by these dragons. That's what makes it so fucking awesome. Like, they're trying to, early on in the movie, there's like this rogue little group in Christian Bale's community that wants to do things differently than he's running it, right? So like, no, we're starving. We're going to go harvest the crops. Even though it's too soon to do it, they don't want to wait anymore. So they go, and the dragon sees them, and he just like torches their entire field. So it like fucks over the whole community, and just that action sequence of them going there, the dragon coming in, and then them having to get rescued by Christian Bale, because that's the kind of character he is. Like, even someone stabs him in the back, he's not going to leave him out just to die and burn, right? And then how that leads into like what Matthew McConaughey's character like introduces into that, where it's like we're not just going to survive, we're going to fucking hunt these things and kill them, and we're going to take back over the world, right? That's fucking awesome, right? You're goddamn right it is. And Matthew McConaughey comes in. He's got this entire like military industrial complex with him. He's got motorcycles with these 3D mapping triangulators. He's got a fucking chopper that goes up, and like these guys that have like geotagged like heads up displays helmets, and they're skydiving, like trying to fucking, as they're free falling, like it's Point Break or Drop Zone or some shit, like kill the dragon in the air as they're free falling without their parachutes. How can you not fucking like that? That's fucking awesome. I want to watch it again right now.
Stop this podcast and go watch it.
Hell yeah. Random Dragon is... Well, Elvis Mitchell, so this was interesting to me too. Elvis Mitchell, who was a critic for the New York Times and now does...
Probably like the most famous critic.
Yeah, he does like a ton of stuff out here in LA. So we've all seen him talk because he does like he hosts a lot of events out here.
Right.
He said that Ring of Fire is nearly a minor classic. He loved it.
Yeah. This is awesome. Yeah. That guy knows what he's talking about.
So should we talk about one more movie? Should we bring this to a close? Okay, you guys are going to get mad at me about this. Well, Jim is.
Uh-oh.
Jim is.
Jim's already spinning in his seat.
Shit, I just knocked the microphone too.
Double Impact.
It's
starring Van Damme. It was released when, like 91?
91.
Right?
91,
yeah. And Van Damme plays two roles.
Twin brothers.
And it made $30 million. I couldn't find how much
either.
it cost to make, but so Rotten Tomatoes, 20%.
That's a little high.
What did Cyborg get?
It's not on Metacritic.
Do you know what Cyborg got?
I don't know what Cyborg got, but I did look up Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which I think is a genuinely terrible movie, and that has 93%.
Dude, that movie's...
I don't dislike, I really liked the first Mission Impossible, and I thought the fourth one was really good.
You like all the shitty ones, but you hate all the good ones. Because you don't like Mission Impossible 3, do you?
It's okay.
And have you seen the new one, Fallout?
No.
Double Impact. Double Impact.
So here's the thing.
Do you like Van Damme in general? Like, do you like his movies? Or are you not
there was a period of my childhood for I'm going to say about 3 years where Universal Soldier was legitimately like my favorite movie.
Hell yeah.
And I was 8 or some shit. Right. It's like, fuck yeah, this movie's awesome. Dude's cutting off ears, making necklaces. Right? Sean Connery is eating all this fucking diner food, and then he kicks the chef's ass. Right? So the answer is yes. I'm indifferent towards Van Damme. I don't dislike him by any means, but I'm not like you are. Like Mike is a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, and so is Will for that matter.
He loves him.
These guys get together a lot on Friday nights and just watch these old shitty 80s action
movies.
Awesome movies.
These old 80s action movies that are all top line by Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Or Seagal.
Or Stallone or Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. We watched them all.
So
the action daddies, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason we're talking about Double Impact is it sort of gave Will, the genesis of the idea for this.
Because
for us talking about
so
this.
I went and read the reviews of this because when we watched it, I had seen a bunch of Van Damme movies, and my expectations were it's going to be a Van Damme movie, right? And to me, it's not a bad. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I think it's competently directed. I would say that
filmed on location in Hong Kong.
It is
so fucking what?
But that's
cool.
The person who made the guy who directed this movie very clearly has training in classical visual design. Has looked at old Hollywood movies and is doing mise en scène, because there's shit with that fight scene where it's all dark. And there's a rotating light, and each scene has its own approach to the visual design of it. They actually stopped and thought about, and even if it's a Van Damme movie and it's corny, people are actually putting thought into how to make this movie, and they're putting effort into it. It has Bolo Young in it, who's a really well regarded martial artist who plays the villain in Hong Kong, and I just thought it was a fun action thriller, and I think 20% is really bad.
I'd seen the movie a long time ago. And I liked it, and I was telling Will we should see it. He'd never seen it, and he was asking me how bad it was because I'm guessing he'd read reviews, and I'm like, I don't remember it being it's not my favorite Van Damme movie. My favorite Van Damme movie is Bloodsport, and I told him I don't remember it being that bad. And we watched it, and it's I've seen some really bad movies because I'm a big horror fan, and if you know about horror, there's just a ton of crap in there, and I've seen a lot of really bad horror films. And I watched some of those, and then I watched Double Impact, and I'm it's not anywhere near as bad as a lot of films like that. No, it's not as good as the classics. It's not as good as really well made films
No, it's
You know,
not like a
but-
James Cameron movie.
No, it's not
like,
Terminator 2, whatever. But it's not. It's not like a
not
piece
Cyborg.
of shit, right? It's not Cyborg. Cyborg
okay.
was fucking awful.
So I want to chime in because I'm not as well versed in the Van Damme universe of movies as you guys are, right? Or not just him, but like that whole that era of like action movies. And I saw Double Impact for the first time watching it in 2018. Like this is working against my argument, but it feels so fucking isolated in that era of just like horribly choreographed fight scenes, just like overlit. The script is the biggest piece of shit I've ever could ever even imagine. Like it was such a horrible story and characters, and it's just like so conveniently like paced and timed out. Like this guy just takes a 6-month infant from Hong Kong, right? Leaves the other one there. He goes and moves to France, and then he grows up in Los Angeles and is Jean-Claude Van Damme with his fucking Belgium accent. And his Hong Kong twin brother counterpart has the exact same Belgian accent, right?
So good.
And so hold on. And so like the guy that saved Jean-Claude Van Damme's character as a little infant child that raised him, right? His name is Frankie, and so they opened up like a combo karate dojo / ballet studio, right? In the same open space. Like there's both these things going on at the same time. And then the thing that bumped me the most that I just like it was the thing that sets up the whole movie, which is like I'm going back to the script. Like the script is such a piece of shit, It's like the screenplay by Jean-Claude Van Damme, produced by Jean-Claude Van Damme, right?
He wanted to get involved.
So it's the whole sequence in the beginning, like showing the backstory of like how the twin brothers, both played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, get separated when they're 6 months old. So fast forward 25 years later, Jean-Claude Van Damme, the American one, Chad is his name. He's like in a leotard, like teaching an aerobics class or some shit, and then he goes to like handle a little scuffle in the karate half of their business, right?
Yep.
And just kicks this guy's ass.
So good.
And as he's doing that, just some random guy like waltzes right through into the guy that saved Jean-Claude Van Damme, Frankie's office, and hands him like paparazzi photos of the twin brother in Hong Kong. And he's like, "Yep, that's got to be him." I was like, "Why? What were they even looking for? Like, who sent this guy? Like, who's paying for this messenger to come in there?" And then,
this just makes
hold
me.
on. I'm not done yet.
So good.
Right? And then Frankie goes and talks to Chad, like, you have a brother and I'm not your uncle. And he's like, "Oh, you're telling me after 25 years you're not my uncle." "Okay, Frankie," like what? And they hop on a flight to Hong Kong to go find his long twin brother. Yeah. For what? And then Frankie just waltzes right into like the underground, like
The
drug
triads or whatever.
trafficking world of Hong Kong, just like he never fucking missed a beat. And it's a quarter of a century later, right? All the exact same people are still the doormen and all these stupid underground
It's so
fucking.
good.
It's so
It's so
Oh my
good.
god, that's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
It does live in a. You are right. It lives in a sort of world of movies that people like Van Damme,
Right.
Stallone, Schwarzenegger.
No, it's totally
and-
preposterous,
yeah, it's
but that's why it's good.
But like, you don't watch one of these films to like see this like amazing, well written story. It's just
Of
not
course
what it's
not, dude.
for.
Like
You see like a ridiculous dude just beating ass.
right, but so in a bunch of action scenes, there's all this unmotivated slow mo cuts that like it's like real time. They cut to slow mo for like half of a punch, and before the punch even lands, they cut back to real time. It's like, why are they doing it? Like, why cut the speed of the fucking film you're shooting? Like, why vary it that much with the same punch, like the same single punch and the same guy? Granted, like there are some like the one cool scene that I did like was in the goofy Jean-Claude Van Damme guy goes and like saves the girlfriend of
Chad.
his right. So Chad goes and saves Danielle, who's a blonde chick in Hong Kong, right? And they're getting chased out or whatever, and they're hopping across all those like shrimp
Oh, the
boats or whatever.
boat?
And it's
Yeah,
just,
that
it's like
scene is awesome. Yeah.
That scene's pretty cool. It's just like you're talking about the mise en
scene-
scene of like keeping it all like a continuous action scene, but like not having it just be like the shitty
There's a
choreography.
scene kind of really similar to that in Bloodsport. And if you do want to see other Van Damme movies, I would recommend that one.
I like
minus
On Target
the
the
first 15 minutes, which is like some of the worst child acting I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen the Babadook, and it's just way worse than that.
And Mike went to LMU.
Yeah, but after that, it's like a really good Just
I
it's
would
a really
say
simple movie.
See Hard Target. Have you
Hard
seen
Target's
that?
really
Yeah.
fun.
Directed by John Woo.
No.
Okay,
So
there's a
fun.
scene. There's a scene. Okay, this is the one thing I'm going to say about Hard Target. We can start talking about this. So all the police in New Orleans and Hard Target are on strike except for one detective.
Is
for
it
some
Jean-Claude
reason.
Van Damme?
No, it's some other
He
woman.
plays a bum.
And
What?
and it's her birthday, and she makes herself a cake and has a little candle on it and is singing to herself. And then she puts it in her desk drawer with the candle still lit and closes it.
Fucking arsonist. Jesus.
My favorite part is when
No one's going to catch her for burning the building down because all the cops are on
And
strike.
why it shouldn't work?
My favorite part
Someone's
of that
gotta
film
fight
is
crime.
he has like this like really bad trying to do a Cajun accent because he's French Creole, I guess, in New Orleans, and then they go into the woods. And they meet his uncle, who's played by Wilford Brimley, and he's trying to do some kind of like accent.
He's trying to like follow Van Damme.
and it's so bad.
I wonder if he was directed to do that. If,
I don't know what's going
like
on.
on Action, Wilford Brimley, like.
There's
like,
also a scene where Van Damme catches a snake
That's
with
cool.
his bare hands.
But
Well-
it's like when in the movie I think Out for Justice or something like that with Seagal, and he's doing this Brooklyn accent, and I think you told me the story, you read about it. William Forsythe's in the movie as well, who's actually from
Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn, and then Seagal's telling him how to do a Brooklyn accent.
He's criticizing his Brooklyn accent.
The guy who's actually from there.
Does Steven Skull write some of these reviews too?
There's another really funny story if you guys want to hear a Steven Seagal story. That's pretty quick. That's really funny. I forget the guy's name, but he's like a character actor, and he was in The Glimmer Man, I think. The bald guy who plays a serial killer. And he said he was Seagal was going through a phase where he didn't want to do movies where he just killed people because he's like a pacifist and whatever. And the directors and producers asked this actor to go talk to Seagal because they were kind of like chummy. And so he said he was like sitting in the trailer and he waited for Seagal for like an hour because Seagal was like in the back doing something. And then he came out and he had tears in his eyes and he held a script and he told the guy, "This is the greatest script I've ever read." And the guy's like, "What is it? Who wrote it?" He's like, "I did." I love Seagal.
He's so good.
I love it.
Isn't he like the Russian ambassador now
Yep.
too? Anyway, so back to Double Impact.
Well, so one of the reviews is homophobic and racist. I didn't get that movie was racist.
How's it homophobic?
I have no idea.
Who
I don't
was-
even
there wasn't
remember
any gay
anything
people in it.
about
What?
homophobia in that movie. Do you?
Is it because the Nigel Griffith, the Hong Kong villain, who's the guy that has like the Katharine Hepburn, New England, like old money accent in Hong Kong, right? His lead henchman is like this, I'm assuming some precursor to WWE chick, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, her,
the super
yeah.
muscular chick, and she like frisks
She's hot.
/ like borderline eye fucks the shit out of the blonde chick, right? Remember when
so-
she kisses her in like the little safe vault? Like,
Is that
looking for-
homophobic? I don't think
not
that.
No, of
homophobic.
course
I
not.
remember the scene you're talking about.
That's
yeah,
intimidation. That girl is actually, I think her name's Corey Everson, and the reason I know that is because she won like Miss Olympia like 3 or 4.
She totally looks like she won Miss Olympia.
Yeah, so
Okay. So here's another.
And that's
thing.
the first movie.
That is the only like kind of
that's
like
not
hint at
homophobic.
same sex anything. Like no,
well,
of
like,
course
it's not
homophobic.
like they don't say like that's bad or they make fun of it. It's like that just happened because this woman's trying to intimidate this other woman.
Is Chad supposed to be like a homo
No,
in the movie? Is that what-
he hooks up.
Of course he's
with the
not. I'm
blonde.
joking.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
come on. That's like
But it's
this
also
review's
like
bullshit.
what I think is so stupid about the racist thing is it's supposedly racist against Asians, but Van Damme has like a really long history of making movies in Asia with
Yeah.
with Asian filmmakers. Like he worked with John
Him
Woo.
and Bolo Young are
They
really
did.
good friends.
He's really good friends with Bolo Young. He did Kickboxer. He did Bloodsport. Like
I think that's just
He
like an
owes his
umbrella
career
dismissal.
to-
Just like this
it's in
movie's
Asia
racist.
and it's a
whatever.
white guy, so it must be racist.
He
Yeah.
owes his career to that part of the world.
Here's another one. This is about Van Damme's acting. Let's just say he doesn't rival Jeremy Irons' double role in Dead Ringers.
Okay.
He's a martial artist. He's not like a
Well,
British. He's not a British actor
yeah.
trained at like the Royal Dramatic Academy or something. Like, what did you think was going to happen
But
with
it's
Van
like the
Damme
same
in a
thing
double
we
role?
always say. It's
He
like,
was going to
yeah.
change from Van Damme into Daniel Day-Lewis overnight.
But it's like the same thing we always say. It's like it's a horrible movie, but like, what are you comparing it to? Yes, it's a horrible movie if you compare it to like Platoon or The Godfather or The Thing or whatever. But is it a horrible movie compared to like a bunch of these other films that we hate? No. I like it. Jim
Yeah, but
hates
that's
it.
that's
but
no kind of like metric system to like quantify like what makes good versus bad. Because like,
That's the whole
are the
point
shots
of this,
in
yeah.
focus? Can you hear it? Like, is the sound synced up? Yeah, of course. It's a professionally fucking produced movie that was internationally released. Of course, it's going to be like competently directed if it costs whatever millions to make. Like, no studio's just going to hire some dipshit off the street. Like, here's $175 million. Go out in the fucking open ocean with Kevin Costner and bring us back something
I would
good.
argue
You know what I mean?
you could you could find big releases that were worse, not as well directed as Double Impact,
Like what?
like Rogue Nation.
Snap, and on that,
I don't know. Like, you're in the minority of the fucking world with that one.
That movie is just horrible.
No, it's not, man.
It's horrible. Well, here's one: Jurassic World.
Okay. Fallen Kingdom is worse than Double Impact.
Well, there you go. And Fallen Kingdom had a $200 million budget.
Have you seen Jurassic World 2?
No.
Okay. The first one looks
Yeah,
like
I thought
fucking
the first
Jurassic
one was
Park
terrible.
compared to Jurassic.
It's that bad?
It is that's got to be one of the worst studio movies I've ever seen ever. I'm not kidding.
That's what I thought about the first one.
I would rather watch Double Impact again
Well, so
than
there
Jurassic
you go.
World 2.
So
yeah, okay.
there you go.
Yeah, there are worse movies in the zeitgeist of fucking humanity than Double Impact. I grant you that. But that doesn't mean Double Impact is good or acceptable. I think it's still a shitty movie.
I don't know. The way
like
you
it.
described it in the first part of this podcast
I was like,
makes
he's
me want to
describing the greatest movie
so
ever
good.
made.
It's so good. It's
don't know,
obviously
man.
not meant to be taken seriously either. Like, it's just a fun
It's an
movie.
action movie. I don't know.
But it's not even a good action movie. Like, the action pieces and, like, the fight scenes and stuff aren't even, like... There's shit in Universal Soldier that's cooler than that. You know what I mean? Like, they're not...
Awesome.
It's... I'm disagreeing with it's competently directed. 'Cause and, like, all this... The mise-en-scene, like, there was thought put into it. Because I think the fight scenes were utterly forgettable.
Well, but does he? So I don't know.
and that's
how
what
Van
that's what a
Damme-
Jean-Claude Van Damme movie is.
But I
about
don't
the
know
fight
how
scenes.
Van Damme works, but like once in a lot of instances, once martial arts stars reach a certain stature, they direct their own fight scenes. So like with Donnie Yen, for instance, he directs his own fight scenes, and the director is not directing those; he's directing the rest of the movie.
That's pretty cool.
So
I
are
don't
you
think
talking
he was
about
at
he's
this point.
directing the film during those sequences, or he's choreographing
Both.
the action
He's
of
doing
the,
both.
I don't think he'd be big enough at this point because all he'd done was Bloodsport and Kickboxer. Well, I guess he did Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Lionheart.
especially not in 1990 or 91.
Well, he
like,
did like 4 movies already, I guess.
yeah, but I'm
so-
saying like that. What you're talking about with Donnie Yen doing this shit
Yeah.
now, that's like this new era of like actors turning filmmakers. You know, like Ben Affleck, Clint Eastwood.
Well, look, Jackie Chan directed his own movies.
Right, but I'm saying like that creative latitude was not given to actors 30 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way that like they're just gonna allow an actor to direct like part of it, like a fucking movie, a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, which is going to be nothing but like action pieces after the other of fight scenes. They're not going to like let him direct that shit.
I actually
think-
I don't remember the action
I
sequences.
think
Exactly, right?
the
'Cause they're
No,
forgetting.
but I like the one at the end when they're in the boat.
You mean the shipyard?
Don't they go into the ship at the end?
Yeah, they do.
And like the lighting is weird. It's like all dark.
Yeah, I mean that's for like a minute.
And then he fights Bull
Yeah, but
Young,
then
and
he
they're
punches a
throwing
hole in the wall
Yeah, I
and
like
the
that
light
scene.
goes away.
Yeah.
What I mean,
Don't quote me on this, but I think the choreographer of the fight scenes in that movie was Frank Dukes.
Oh my God, was it?
And
No.
that might explain some stuff.
Who's that?
He's the guy who Bloodsport is based on, but like he basically, according to most people, just made everything up. And he said that was his real life, but it was just a bunch of nonsense.
And it has all the records that he holds, but it's like records of what? This fictional tournament?
Hell yeah! I want to go watch Bloodsport.
Dude, Bloodsport's awesome. And you should see Street Fighter, because that's a really good movie.
Oh my God, that movie's horrible.
God, please
So,
don't ever say that sentence again.
Do we want to
yeah, let's
wrap up?
I think we've said what. It's
been a very healthy conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna get Jim a Double Impact Blu-ray pretty soon as a present.
I think everybody in the world needs to watch Rush. Just
And Reign of Fire.
at some point in the next week.
How much would you hate me if I watched Rush and said Double Impact was better?
You would say that anyways, even if we never had this conversation, because you have dog shit taste.
Yes.
Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, this is great.
This has been
Thank
fun.
you.
We'll see you next time. I hope you
Adios.
enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.